Welcome, everybody. We're opening the Zoom room a couple moments early just to let y'all enter the space. We have a pretty big audience today, a really exciting topic. We are joined by some amazing folks. So welcome, my name is Will Torres. I'm one of the admission officers here at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Today, we are going to be talking about how do you prepare for a career in entrepreneurship? What are some of the resources, tips, and things to keep an eye out while you're at the GSB? Let's go ahead and get to our panelists. If we can go from left to right. So Jean-Pierre, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jean-Pierre. I also go by JP for short. I'm originally from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and I've been living in the US for about 10 years now. So I just finished my first year at the GSB. And over the summer, I'm actually doing what's called the Both a Chin Fellowship. It's a fellowship whereby students are given a stipend and they're encouraged to explore any space or business idea that they're interested in hopes that I could find something they could focus on entirely their second year. And I'm currently in New York visiting family, but tomorrow I'll actually fly back to Palo Alto. So I'll be near the Stanford campus for the entire summer. And I'm super excited to be here with all of you today.
Nice. Jean-Pierre, did you know you wanted to go into entrepreneurship coming into business school?
Yeah, I actually did. So for me, it was one of my main goals of going to business school. And it's something I thought of really ever since I was an undergrad for a number of reasons. I think primarily because I grew up in a family that's pretty entrepreneurial, even though at the very low scale of things. So for example, my grandparents growing up, they were both self-employed. So my grandfather, for example, he was a tailor. My grandmother had a small shop in her local neighborhood. My parents, similar situation. My father is self-employed. He's an electrical engineer where he does installations for local customers. And my mother has a kindergarten where she enrolls kids and essentially ensures their education for their first few years. So I've always been around people who have been very independent. So for me, it was always a goal. And I just wanted to make sure I could go to a place where I would be able to give an edge to my career so I could make the most of it.
Nice. Thanks for joining us today. Aaron, could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days?
Yeah, thanks, Will. So I graduated last year from the GSB in the middle of the pandemic, as it sounds like Yaniv is doing himself this year, or at least at the tail end. But these days, I am the co-founder and head of growth at the mental health technology company called Prairie Health. So I founded this with a couple other folks from Stanford who I met while at the GSB. They were not the GSB themselves. And we got started just before the start of the pandemic and ended up launching with our first customers the week of graduation last year. So it's been about a year now that we've been live, and we're very excited by the work we've been able to do over the course of that last year.
Nice. And then Aaron, did you know you wanted to go into entrepreneurship coming into business school?
Yes and no. It wasn't as clear as JP, I'd say. I knew that I think, or at least for me, going to Stanford is an acknowledgement that entrepreneurship is something that I'm very interested in. I did not expect to be going into entrepreneurship right away. I thought, okay, I'll be spending money to go to school. It's not necessarily the best time to start your own company. Let's get established a bit in the industry before deciding to start your own thing. But for me, it ended up being a decision. Well, if not now, then when? Now is there's no time like the present to try something out. So that's where things have ended up, and with the support of family and friends, have been able to do so far.
Nice. Thank you for joining us today. Yaniv, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days?
Of course. Hey, everyone. Yaniv. It's a very bittersweet moment for me because I just graduated 2 weeks ago. So it's kind of like saying farewell to all your friends. So it's kind of difficult, but also very exciting. At least we got a in-person graduation, which was amazing. So what I'm doing right now is working on a startup in the food delivery space that is backed by Atomic. And actually what happened, I did a summer internship with them. And once it was over, basically they asked
Yaniv, you
in the
froze for a
summer.
moment. There it goes.
And that's what I was doing for that year, so far for this year.
Okay, you broke up for a little bit at the end of there. Can you recap the last thing that you said, please?
Sure. I did a summer internship at Atomic, and then they asked me to join as an EIR, and that's what I've been doing for the past year, and now moving on forward with that idea.
Nice. And entrepreneur in residence, the EIR?
Yes. Awesome. Yes, exactly.
Cool. And then you're probably going to know what I'm going to ask you. Did you know what you wanted, that you were going to go into entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So I started a company back in Israel 5 years before coming to the GSB. And that was always part of my goal of coming here, is to kind of like build strong friendships and a community globally that could help me, start something else and find what I'm really passionate about and move forward with it. So definitely yes.
Nice. And then Claire, welcome, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days?
Thanks, Will. It's great to be here. I graduated in 2018, so I've been out for 3 years. It has flown by. And I used to be a high school math teacher and school administrator, and came to school to sort of figure out how to ensure that our students were in upwardly mobile jobs in their mid-20s. And Stanford enabled me to pursue that through the Social Innovation Fellowship. And so I've been running an organization called the Arena Inc. ever since, which is a nonprofit that helps ensure that educational institutions and industry partners are connected. So we have a career navigation set of tools for young people ages 18 to 20, and then a client services practice helping institutions do this work in more depth. And definitely still in building mode. So happy to share all of the learnings.
Nice. And then surprise, surprise, did you want to go into entrepreneurship coming into the GSB?
I think Stanford, the motto really encourages creativity and innovation and taking kind of non-traditional paths. So whether I knew that explicitly or not, I sort of felt like some of my experience was encouraging that. But no, I think I cared about the mission and was going to kind of support where I felt like I could support, and ended up building because I was probably more stubborn and arrogant than I like to admit.
All right, so from here, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing screen. This way we'll be able to focus on our panelists. And so speaking about launching something of your own, Aaron, maybe we can start with you. What was it like launching during the pandemic? How did you tap into the GSB resources or your class to help you along that way?
Yes, very interesting time, as you might imagine. A lot of uncertainty as the world moves forward. In March, it was my final quarter at the GSB. I had been working with my co-founders on Prairie Health at the time, and so we went from in-person to being fully remote, and we've been fully remote ever since, despite all living in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. As a result of having a year and a half a year and 2/3 of the 2 years at Stanford, I was fortunate enough to be well connected with a lot of different resources, professors, opportunities. So we relied heavily on the Venture Studio for access to expertise, or to pitch competitions, or access to investors. Relied heavily during that time on introductions via the alumni network to venture capitalists to raise our initial round of financing, as well as, frankly, from classmates who were involved with working at these VCs or had worked there previously. We just found that it didn't really change anything in our ability to have the conversations we wanted to have and to meet the people we wanted to meet, thanks to the network that Stanford had in front of us.
Nice. And then you mentioned Design Studio. Venture Studio. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is? And if anybody else has taken advantage of that resource, please feel free to chime in as well.
Yeah, so I can share a bit. It feels like everywhere you look around Stanford, there is an entrepreneurial resource for you. Whether or not you realize it is one thing. I think like there's more that exists than I was probably even aware. Venture Studio is one of the flagship ones where it's a interdisciplinary program or cooperative almost that's headquartered at the GSB, at least in terms of physical space, where you have physical space to work together, to build ideas. They bring in experts from, they bring in like lawyers, they bring in accountants, they bring in venture capitalists, all sorts of people to help you incubate your ideas and get off the ground, as well as connect you to pitch opportunities and help facilitate meeting potential co-founders if you have an idea, or getting connected to an idea if you don't have one, but you know what you want to be an entrepreneur. So it's something that we've, and even today, there's an email list that's very vibrant of people sharing resources and building community. That's incredibly valuable when you're trying to figure out what do we do in this situation, or does anyone have experience here? That's where Stanford has particularly shined and helped us out.
Yeah, if I could add a little bit to this. So concerning the email list, I found it to be super useful to me as well. So as a very recent example, a few weeks ago, I sent an email on that listserv to express that I was looking for people who are familiar with the car insurance industry, because I'm looking into a peer-to-peer car sharing platform that I was hoping to work on potentially over the summer. And there's an MBA too who saw the email, reached out to me, and we've been meeting ever since. So we've met about 7 times so far, and we're actually going to work together over the summer on that idea. So just wanted to give you a very tangible example of how the Venture Studios listserv has been actually helpful.
And while we're on the topic of resources, Claire, you mentioned the Center for Social Innovation. Can you tell us a little bit about how you work with them?
Yeah, the Center for Social Innovation is the sort of hub of social innovation and nonprofit opportunities at the GSB. And they have a ton of different ways that they kind of have events at lunch and bring in speakers and create more exposure to resources. I think during the school year, you can do independent studies and internships and sort of think about carving out space to test some of the things that you maybe want to in entrepreneurship under Stanford's umbrella. And then I did an internship at a nonprofit venture philanthropy fund over my summer, which was subsidized through the SMIF program, which enables, now that I'm an employer, it's also awesome for getting interns, but it enables you to sort of take risks during your summer and feel like you're making enough money and you're part of the Stanford community, and you can kind of workshop your learnings or hypotheses or whatever things you're kind of asking throughout. And then the Social Innovation Fellowship, I think it's changing names, or there's sort of different opportunities your second year or afterwards on how you might be able to pursue this type of work full time afterwards. But so they're pockets of kind of different things. They're really great advisors at the center. I found the application process for my fellowship one of the most valuable things I did at Stanford, just because you have to kind of articulate your business model and value prop. And I just, hadn't done those things in a formal sense previously, and get really, really specific one-on-one feedback, great office hours, really great advisors that continue to benefit me today. So just sort of a wealth of resources. And if you're kind of wondering and wanting to explore while you're there, kind of just going to their events to start off is a really helpful way to get started.
Yeah. So while we're on the topic of kind of resources and communities, Yaniv, I know you were a leader of one of the communities. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, of course. So I was trying to be as involved as I can in entrepreneurship within the GSB.
Oh, Yaniv, you froze.
For the elections.
You froze for a moment. Maybe if you go off video for a moment.
Yes, is that better?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I was trying to be as involved as I can in the entrepreneurial community. So I decided to become the president of the Entrepreneurship Club with 4 other members. And essentially what we've been doing is, bring speakers who talk about their entrepreneurial journey. We created brainstorm sessions and kick off ideas with other schools within Stanford. We also partnered a lot with the venture studio that JP mentioned a little bit back. For example, we had one interesting idea, which was grad check, which was we connected current students who were looking to follow an idea and pursue entrepreneurship with alumni who had resources and connections and capital, but not the time to kind of like work on an idea actively. And that actually created new companies, with cross-class collaboration. And that was really amazing. And that was the reason why, that was among the things that really make the GSB and Stanford special.
Yeah, talk about impact by like connectivity and action. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to this first question that's in our Q&A box from Atopia, just because I think coming back to that GSB experience, there are some pretty incredible moments during the academic year, but then there's a summer between your MBA 1 and your MBA 2 year. For some folks who might be going into some more traditional routes, that could be the time that they were doing internships or some other types of ways to explore those realms. How might you, so maybe Claire, you talked a little bit about the SNF. Can you tell us what you were doing during the summer between your MBA 1 and MBA 2 year? And then we'll start with you and then other folks can chime in. Like, what can folks do to advance kind of their career aspirations in this field?
Yeah, so I guess first, just to start, like if you come, you're gonna have 2-ish years to have this unique opportunity to not be working full time. And so more like before kind of these formal opportunities, there are also just really informal ways to be like, okay, I have more time and like brain space to think about stuff than I maybe ever will. So meeting with professors, meeting with other students, creating more informal ways to like workshop things or ask questions, I found really, really useful. And I spent probably more time doing those things than joining a bunch of clubs. And so it's sort of like figuring out where you want to allocate your time. Formally, during my summer, so I had previously taught and noticed most of our students were struggling with college persistence and workforce connectedness after high school. And so I was sort of like, not that there's a silver bullet, but that's a thing I want to understand, like sort of interventions in higher ed and in workforce development, what's happening after high school. So I had some sort of questions that I wanted to explore. And I also wanted to determine whether I wanted to remain working in schools closer to students or think about other places of leverage like funding or like policy. And so I had kind of done a bit of research and found an organization called the Charter School Growth Fund that supports public schools across the country, and felt like that would help me understand, like sort of functionally, did I enjoy thinking about working at education kind of from that like 30,000 foot up place? And also how would that also give me a landscape view on like, what are some interesting school models across the country? How might I kind of like expose myself to different opportunities? And then Smith supported my ability to do that. So sort of co-applied with the employer, and then was able to sort of like reflect on my experience with other folks who had done similar internships afterwards. And then my second year, I did a couple independent studies where I had sort of secondary sets of questions and was like, before I pick a full-time job, how do I think about learning in a more kind of focused way? And again, Stanford really enabled my ability to do that.
Right. JP, you're also doing something really cool between and during the summer. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, happy to. I guess what I'm formally doing over the summer is the Both and Fellowship. But before talking about that, I would like to tell you about what I've been doing over the past few weeks, actually. So ever since school ended, what I've been doing is trying to reflect on what I've learned and gotten from the first year. So it's really been a lot of journaling and a lot of thinking about what I've gained, what I should focus on going forward, and also connecting with a lot of alumni that I previously started connecting with over the school year, just to make sure that I'm thinking of the next steps in the best way possible. So for me, I've been in somewhat of a dilemma because whenever I came here to the GSB, I was very adamant on working on something that can be impactful in places like Haiti, my home country. And what I found is that over the course of the year, I've been working on different ideas, and little by little, I felt like I've been pivoting away from anything that could work in those markets. So that's where my dilemma came. I was wondering if I was being true to my mission and to my goal. So essentially what I've been doing over the past few weeks is really reflecting on what I want to do for the summer and for my second year of the MBA to make sure that I'm actually doing something that can make me feel fulfilled. So it's been a lot of reflecting and whatnot, but what I will be doing starting July is the Both Fellowship, where essentially we're giving funding to explore a business idea, or it can even be a space. So it's a lot of customer discovery interviews, which means getting out the door, speaking to people who might be your potential customers, making sure that there's a need and that there's also people willing to pay for whatever service that you might be offering to make sure that you have something that may be viable. And the hope is that your second year of the MBA and going forward, you could actually start building that idea off the ground. So I'm really looking forward to it, but I just want to make sure that before I start, I nail down at least the industry that I want to focus on because of my concerns that I explained to you previously.
Nice. So JP was talking about how to focus his MBA 2-year. So maybe Aaron or Yaniv, any advice for him? Courses, electives, experiences that might be really helpful for JP to think about.
Sure. I learned that everyone is just super committed to your success, whether it's amazing professors who are just completely open to connect you to anyone they can, to listen to you, to help you think through. I took, for example, a class called Product Launch with Professor Jonathan Levav, who I think is really amazing. He's just been so helpful. And there's so many other professors and even your peers, your classmates, everyone's just so committed to helping each other out. It's just magical. And that's what really makes the GSB what it is. So just reaching out to people, you have like everything is reachable here, and it's just talking to people and learning more throughout, those discussions. That for me was invaluable.
Yeah, Yaniv, I actually get a lot of questions about like how accessible are the faculty. Can you talk a little bit more about like how do you reach out? Do you have to take their class? What are some of the settings that you're able to engage with them?
Sure. So I'm actually shocked now after 2 years by how accessible they are. It seems far away because they're so busy. They're professors, they're investors, they have so much going on. But then you reach out, whether it's by phone, on campus, via email, like I'm thinking about pivoting, or I'm thinking about applying to this job, and I was wondering if you have a couple of minutes to grab coffee and talk about it. And the answer is always yes. And they would sit down with you and just be super helpful. It's like once you're here and once you're part of the community, they just want you to reach out and they want to be helpful. And it's kind of like, maybe it's kind of like a win-win, I guess, at some point, but it's just really amazing. Like, I don't have any other words for it.
Nice. Aaron, any tips for MBA 2-year?
Yes, definitely. Although everyone's MBA 2-year is going to look different. That's part of what's great about Stanford. When thinking about entrepreneurship, there is a big trade-off you have to consider about when and how early you want to be working on your company. So on my end, I started working on Prairie Health in the winter of my second year, so 2/3 of the way through, during my second year. So there's a very strong trade-off in terms of the amount of time you work on your new company, which you think and hope will be the next big thing, or versus enjoying your time at Stanford, taking advantage of other classes you might not otherwise take. So for me, my second year was full of classes that were directly relevant to my actual company that I was working on the side, which I found to be very useful in that fewer things are in the abstract. We're like, oh, what if we were thinking about this? How would we approach it? It's actually, I am thinking about this. How do you think I should approach this? And it helps you engage with the material, or helps me engage with the material much more. So my second year, I took a course on mental health innovation that was offered across the street, as they say. I took a class on healthcare, leadership. I took a class on soft skills, interpersonal dynamics, to think through how do I manage difficult conversations as they come up in the context of entrepreneurial experiences. Things like that really helped. I was able to take courses through this specific lens, which was very helpful.
Yeah, and so I'm going to jump into Sabrina's question here, talking about how to incubate ideas. What are some of the resources that GSB offered? So I know, Aaron, you just mentioned launching and working on it during your MBA 2-year. Were there any other resources, folks you turned to during that process?
Yes. So as with anything at Stanford, it does feel like there are opportunities around the corner, and they happen all the time organically. One of the best things about Stanford is that most people have at the back of their minds an interest in entrepreneurship. So everyone is excited to talk about new ideas, so you often just hear about ideas and think through opportunities because of your classmates' experiences and their backgrounds, some of the ways in which the diversity of backgrounds really plays as an advantage. But how I actually got connected to my now co-founders was there is as simple as a spreadsheet of people, like a form that people filled out to say, I have an idea, I'm looking for co-founders, I'm looking to get connected to a startup. And then from there, coffee chats happen. So I met one of my co-founders over coffee 6 months before we decided to start working together, and kept in touch. Just at the GSB, would meet every couple months, see how things were going, get more excited about what we could be building together, and the rest is history in some ways. Nice.
Talking about co-founders and finding partners to launch ideas with, does anybody else have any kind of experiences with how you found people to assist you in this journey?
Well, I would say another one is by taking some of the entrepreneurship classes that the GSB offers. So for example, I enrolled in Lean Launchpad in my second quarter at the GSB. And that can also give some insight into the previous question as well about the incubation of ideas. So in order to apply for that class, it's a very experiential learning class, meaning it's super hands-on. So you have to apply as a team. And finding team members to work with me was actually pretty easy. So first of all, there was a platform allowing not only GSB students, but Stanford students at large to find each other based on interest. So essentially say, hey, I'm interested in that field or industry and I want to take this class. If you're interested, reach out to me. And that was the way that I approached it, but also paying attention to what people were interested in. So a few people ended up being my teammates, were people that I had conversations with previously, and I remembered what they were passionate about, what their skill sets were. And I just reached out and said, hey, I'm going to take Lean Launchpad. Would you be interested in taking it with me? And that was a very easy way to actually get a team on board. Now, when it comes to that actual class, it's been extremely valuable to me. It's really a class that teaches you how to go by and validate whether or not an idea has business potential by doing a lot of customer discovery interviews. So the class expected us to put in about 20 hours of work a week per person. So you really have to take it seriously, but you get so much out of it as well. And it teaches you the right types of questions to ask potential customers, to ask people in the industry, the right ways to go by testing your hypothesis. And it's really a way for you to save a lot of time as you're exploring a business idea, because you can quickly determine whether or not it's worth continuing or not, instead of spending so much time and resources into something that may not actually have so much potential. And to give you a interesting anecdote, so right after taking that class, it was spring break. I felt so encouraged that I actually spent part of my spring break going out and interviewing a number of retailers, just because I felt like I had a strong framework in place and I was not shy about, talking to potential customers. So I literally spoke to about 90 retailers, just going door to door, talking to them about what their needs were, what difficulties that they were facing, in order to see if I could find a pain point that's significant enough, but that they would also be willing to pay for if I were to come up with a solution. So that class really gave me a framework that has been super useful. And it also a big time saver because it helps me validate whether or not a business has potential even before I put in too much resources into it.
Yeah, it says something when there's a class that gets you to spend your entire spring break validating a business idea or something that you really care about. Speaking about things that you care about, Claire, as you were working with the arena, were there any like seminal moments, aha experiences, or like moments at the GSB that have shaped, do you think that shaped the way that you operate as a kind of a leader in the field?
It's a good question. Yes, I want to think about that. Actually, so I think one of the biggest things I learned, with the biggest things I have learned since being at school, was sort of like how much I came into school with, and like certain moments during the GSB like validated that. I think at first I was sort of like, I need to gain some financial fluency, build some business chops to be taken seriously. Like my work builds trust with some people, but not all. And if I want to start an organization, I need to be able to kind of demand more for and from others. And so I felt actually like this may be a long way of answering your question, but like in the beginning, I felt sort of insecure that, I hadn't learned certain things in finance and accounting that a lot of my peers had, and built some fluency. But I think actually the second year, where a lot more of the classes, like Aaron mentioned, are electives around EQ and management, brought to the surface a lot of experiences that I had come in with that were going to be really useful. And that those like small moments in touchy-feely or in other courses where you're role playing or you're like kind of doing case studies or managing different challenges live, stamped for me that like I had built up some of those skills previously and got to practice them again during school, and then reminded again since that those are really useful. That like at the end of the day, there's sort of like what we're doing, which is about supporting young people and bringing together schools and employers. But at the end of the day, it's about like people on my team and the students that we work with and the employers that we work with. And it's about kind of emotions and connections and motivation. And that sort of feels true above all else. And so I think those moments in classes that reminded me of what I had built before and like what matters at the end of the day, I think continue to, like, those are the things that keep me up at night, and felt like a helpful couple years where I was sort of reminded of that, and I'm still.
Yeah, so Aaron, similar questions for you, like leading Prairie Health. Were there any moments, kind of pivotal moments where you were just like, something you learned that you carry and continue to apply today?
Yeah, similarly hard question, as it should be. I'd say, like, one, there's a class called Entrepreneurial Finance, taught by Rob Siegel, that's highly rated for good reason. It teaches you all about the nuance of working with venture capitalists. What are all the different tools and mechanisms that you have to negotiate this thing that I had never seen before in terms of a term sheet? So that was immensely helpful and will continue to be helpful as we raise additional funding moving forward. So that's one thing that, in terms of practical skills, that I would not have taken otherwise if I hadn't been both interested in entrepreneurship and at the GSB. I would be reading blog posts and being very confused. Otherwise, I'd say the interpersonal dynamics class, or affectionately called touchy-feely, is always, or for me, it was an incredibly profound experience, and a sentiment shared by many of my classmates as well, where it dissects how do you interact with the group. What are the things that motivate you? How do you motivate and influence others? And there's a lot of self-reflection that is, I think, incredibly important as a leader, to be able to figure out what are the people who report to you. What do they care about? How do you support their goals, and how do you make sure that you are working together constructively rather than destructively? So that's something that I draw on, say, when managing people and when, frankly, interacting with other members of my team, and also personal relationships as well, because interpersonal dynamics is life in many ways.
Yaniv, this question, I'm going to start with you. You had a venture before coming to the GSB. And so this is coming from Victor, about he's heard that you don't really need an MBA to successfully launch a startup venture. So what would your response be to folks who say that? And how did the GSB prepare you for entrepreneurship? Or what else did you get from the experience that you might not have otherwise?
Yeah, so let me turn off the video so we don't create lags here. But basically, very good question. I actually had this discussion with 5 or 10 classmates, and basically what I feel when I'm reflecting back on these 2 years and how I changed. First of all, your perspective. You just think bigger. You aspire higher. Whether it's the people around you, that every single one of them is amazing and interesting, whether it's the speakers that are so inspiring, whether it's VCs who are constantly scouting for people at the GSB who want to start ideas and just look to invest capital in them. All these things just push you forward in a way that, I look at myself 2 years ago and I'm like, it's not the same thing. It's the strong, I don't want to call it network, it's the strong friendships that you've created. These are friends for life. They will be there for you wherever you are in the world. It's the connections and the relationship with the professors and what they've taught you that you'll take forward, and you'll come out a better person, and a more, you can take a company from 0 to 1, or from 0 to 100, but this will just allow you to expand your horizon and to go to places you couldn't otherwise. At least that's what I feel when I think about my experience and and myself right now.
Thank you. Anybody else from the group? How would you respond, or what are your thoughts on the statement? Why get an MBA? You could do a startup or have a venture without one.
Yeah, happy to respond to this one as well. So I think for me, a lot of what Yanni said resonated strongly. But in addition, I think getting an MBA is more about starting a company. It's also about personal growth and personal development. So for me, for example, one of my goals was to really work on my communication skills over the next 2 years at the GSB. So I've been trying to really make the most out of it. So to give you some examples, I've been meeting with my communications coach one-on-one, literally on a weekly basis. On top of that, I've taken electives, communications related. I've taken a class called Essential Strategic Communication, which has been super helpful to me. I was lucky enough to have been able to do what's called a low keynote. So for some context, the low keynote is essentially similar to a TED Talk, but for the GSB. You can literally come up with any topic that you're interested or passionate about, write a talk about it, and deliver it. But the nice thing is you have a coach who works with you as you're crafting your story, and you also have that same coach work with you as you're working on the delivery as well. So all of that has been super invaluable to me. And I could not think of a better place to work on them than here at the GSB. And on top of that, it's also a nice time, those 2 years, to reflect on what my values are, to reflect on what I wanna, or how I wanna come by as a leader. So be exposed to different leadership styles and fine tune my own leadership skills to something that I'm very comfortable with and that feels authentic to me. So I can make the most of my potential as a leader as well in the future. So I would say the soft skills are also an extremely important component of getting an MBA at the GSB. And even though the entrepreneurial aspect is extremely strong, those areas are also well known and extremely important as well to be a successful leader in the future.
Nice. So shameless plug, low keynotes are available. Like many of them are recorded and they're posted on the Stanford GSB YouTube site. So I would definitely recommend checking out some of the different things that like spark passion and life in our students. There's some really awesome talks there. So definitely check that out. Claire, I saw you popped off of mute, so.
If we want to move on though, I'm happy to.
Oh no, please feel free.
I was just going to say, in terms of do you need an MBA? Like, no, you don't need an MBA. You can hack your way into entrepreneurship. And I think you probably are a scrappier leader if you have had to bootstrap things. But it was a huge privilege to be able to earn an MBA. And I think in its very like, on the low end, it's a really strong insurance plan. Like, you have you have the degree that's a signal. You also have all of the relationships that everybody has mentioned, both with your classmates, with professors, with practitioners, and opportunity begets opportunity. So it almost feels like, I sort of felt like the people I know and what I'm able to do because of this experience make me feel even more emboldened to try new things and take risks, because not everybody has this opportunity. Like if you have a mission and you have a pain point that you want to solve and you want to pursue entrepreneurship, like you will make that work regardless of whether you have those letters on your transcript. But I think the series of opportunities that it opens up and people that it opens up continue to benefit me years out and will. And so of course, it's not critical, but you definitely won't regret going. And both the time to reflect and recenter and make a more conscious decision about where you want your career trajectory to go, and all of the people to kind of help you do that, I think are really invaluable during the 2 years, as folks on the panel are mentioning, and then kind of afterwards with the relationships and the network that follow you.
Erin, would you anything to contribute from kind of where you're sitting now that you've started a firm and are working on growing it?
Yeah, I'd echo everyone else. For me, the decision was, I can do all these things individually. I can build a network. I can move from technology to healthcare technology. I can quit my job and do all these things. But I think to Claire's point, there is so much that you can do with an MBA, so many things that you haven't thought about, that ideas you get exposed to. And frankly, the idea of building my network, to exploring new ideas, doing all that individually, it was just not going to happen while working a full-time job. So the Stanford MBA gave this opportunity to pursue professional and personal development, to JP's point, to explore ideas within the industry. How can I make an impact on something that I care passionately about? So that was the culmination of why I eventually decided to pursue an MBA, although I was going back and forth for a long time, and do not regret making the decision to go.
Nice. So 4:45, I want to make sure that we're able to spend a little bit of time on an area that I really love, also selfishly as an admissions officer, the admissions process. I know as folks are thinking about career opportunities in entrepreneurship, there's also that step of, okay, approaching business school? Like, what are some things to think about, tips, best practices? So as you were approaching the MBA and you were applying, I know, Aaron, you just mentioned that you weren't sure at first. Did I get that correct? So when you were filling out your application, like, how did you approach like specificity versus like purpose? Like, how did you talk about your interests in the application?
Yeah, so for my application, I ended up writing, at least for the essay, which is the most salient part for me and probably for many of you listening. You're like, how the heck do I encapsulate my entire life and purpose of being into a single question? Very stressful. So thanks for that.
We're just gonna throw the ball in your court.
So it was, but frankly, it does epitomize the Stanford culture in many ways. It's full of self-reflection, introspection, of figuring out like, how do I want to be spending my time? For me, I ended up writing about my passion to pursue the intersection of technology and neurological disorders. To be honest, I did not expect fully to be actually doing that now that I'm, working in my company, focusing on mental health. But I spent by far the most amount of time on my essay to try to come to like the distillation of why is it that I'm pursuing an MBA and why is this the right next step for me? And that was helpful regardless of whether I actually applied, but obviously was able to get in, so thank goodness for that.
Yeah, it sounds like the focus, rather than writing to get in, you were writing to understand kind of your inner direction, motivations, the things that were driving you.
Yeah.
Did I? For anybody else on the panel, was that a similar kind of like thing that you experienced or process?
Yeah, so I really, what Aaron really resonates with me. I felt the same way. I applied to, at least 4 or 5 schools, and that question is so different, and it requires you to sit down for weeks and think about what is important to you, and you come out a different person in the end. And I know maybe it sounds a bit cliche, but it's true, because you don't get, at least I never got to ask myself that question, and then suddenly you're confronted with it, and it just says a lot about the school, asking that type of question. And pointing back to the school, that emphasis on soft skills, on community, on, we have something called talk, which is basically every week someone else, like another person from our class, comes and tells us his life story and his motivation and what is important to him. And it kind of, similarly to the essay, really kind of like you go a bit deeper, one layer deeper here, and that's what makes this place so unique. So totally agree, Aaron.
Nice. All right, so one question, and this one's gonna go around to everyone here. For anybody who's out there, are there any tips, best practices, advice that you might be able to give, whether it is on the application process, things to think about as you are in the midst of your MBA, or kind of as you're launching into your career in entrepreneurship? So I'll give folks a moment to think that through. That's a really big question with a lot of potential ways to go. And any of your pearls of wisdom would be much appreciated. So whenever someone's ready, feel free to jump on and get us kicked off.
I'll be to go first on this one. So I would say for me, make it a habit to reflect. Sit down, reflect, journal as much as you can. Because it's a practice that not only helped me as I was applying to the GSB, because in order to answer that question, what matters most to you and why, I really had to sit down and think of different episodes in my life that were impactful to me and try to see if there were common themes. So being able to do that exercise was extremely valuable. But then also before I started my first year at the GSB, I actually spent 1 week by myself. I went to Colorado. And I spent that entire time trying to reflect on ways I wanted to approach my first year of the MBA. And I found out to be extremely valuable. When I came here, even though it wasn't a framework that I stuck to entirely, at least I had guiding post. I knew what was important to me, so I knew what opportunities to apply to. I knew what not to pay as much attention to, because the GSB throws so much at you that if you don't take that time to reflect, you just might drown a little bit. And it's been useful to me as well as I kept going through the year. So I've made it a habit to journal as often as I could to make sure I'm not wasting my time at the GSB, because time flies so fast. So if you don't really take the time to reflect, it's almost like you're not making the most of the experience. And most recently, as I've been trying to decide on what to focus on over the summer, and for my second year of the MBA program, reflection has given me so much peace of mind, because I've been able to identify themes that really matter to me, and that's been super gratifying.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can go ahead. Although I'm not part of the admissions committee, I had some conversation we had dinner, me and my housemate, with Kirsten Moss, and what I understood, I think this is important to kind of like note when you apply, is that it's really important to just be genuine and just be yourself, because when you're trying to be someone else, it just doesn't add up. People can sense it. But when you just reflect on what's important to you, you put it down on paper, and everything kind of like matches and works together, and your passion goes through the paper in every aspect of your application. That's what makes a winning application, and I've seen it with so many of my classmates and friends. So that's my number one tip.
Thank you. Aaron or Claire?
Go for it.
Okay, let's see. So I already talked a bit about the essay. So what I'd say is, if you are accepted and joined, don't underestimate the power of the Stanford.edu email address. Something that you have an incredible, unique, and time-limited opportunity to be a student. If you are Aaron and you're asking, if like the day before you get that email address and you send an email to somebody else, they may not respond to you, but you can use the Stanford or the edu email address to have conversations even before you're officially a student, to connect with members of the alumni community. So to get internships, if you want to try out something new even before you start classes, something that people do, not for me, but is an opportunity. So that tool alone opens so many doors. Because you have an opportunity to ask questions, to learn, and people want to support you in that, especially alumni.
Thank you. And Claire, taking us home.
The email address, that's very true. I think it's been already said. I think it's like time to reflect and just like come to the application process and the essay and the experience, like kind of grounded in yourself and what you want from it. Like, I think maybe there's a tendency with the application process to try to sell this grand vision or like the sort of best version of yourself. But I think taking the kind of what matters to you question to its most authentic and simplest form for you will just like set you up for the experience a little bit better too. And I think then going into it, thinking about, there are so many different opportunities and you might feel the need to do everything, but get very little out of everything if you do that. And so spending time thinking about like, what are you trying to learn and what do you bring into the experience to make more selective choices, I found really, really useful.
Thank you. JP, Yaniv, Aaron, Claire, thank you so much for joining us today. I have one more quick slide to share with folks. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to go on to mystanford.mba, create that dashboard to help feed some of the things that you might be interested in learning more. Join us throughout the summer. We're going to have a ton more events with some new cool ones that we're going to be launching in the next few months. So you'll see some advertisements about that from us. Until then, thank you so much for joining us as well, wherever in the world you are. And if I can summarize any of the advice given today that I would extra double tap is you be you. So thank you so much And I hope to see y'all again soon.